Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in this video it's time to talk about rank 1 China when it comes to their aviation stuff. I had a pretty decent time with spading out the army side of things, and the aviation side of things it was very similar. The rank 1 was very courteous, there's a lot of nice vehicles in here. There are a few which are a little bit down and not as great, but overall I'd say my my research through this has been very positive. One thing I also want to point out, which is a big positive for this tree, is if you have a look at the army tech tree, by the time I'd got here and been able to also spade the Stuart on top of it while I was playing stuff like the LVT, I'd only researched 4 other vehicles, whereas as you can see here, after spading 2 other vehicles, the P66 and also the SP2M, I've pretty much been able to research the whole of rank 2. So by spading the whole of rank 1 and playing each vehicle, I've been able to unlock the majority of the second rank, which means that I can now push on after getting 2800 RP straight into rank 3 while spading the rank 2 vehicles. This is just really nice. It basically means that I can play a lot of different vehicles instead of being limited to specific ones. If my research rate was less, being limited to something like an SU-76M or an M24, instead I can play a bunch of different vehicles. So yeah, that's really nice that it leads really well into rank 2. First of all, you have the 2 reserves. So you've got the Gladiator Mark 1, and then you've got the I-15 BIS, which is connected to the I-153 M62. So the Gladiator Mark 1, I think for me, is the weakest plane in this tech tree. It does have some nice characteristics. The 477s are very, very nice. The problem with the Gladiator is that it doesn't do well against other biplanes at its tier. It's very good if it's on an enemy, but the problem is it gets outturned and out energy fought in a biplane by stuff like the I-15, which you see in the Chinese tech tree, and also stuff like the CR-42s in the Italian tech tree or the German tech tree. It does slightly better than the HU-51s, but it gets outsped by the Americans. It just gets absolutely canned by any I-15 in the market, and then also the British already have it, and the Ki-10s also outturn it. So something that you'll find a lot in biplanes is it's not too much about the setup, it's more about getting in there and having a bit of fun. And the Gladiator, it means that you will always have someone on you pretty much instantly, and shaking them off is, well, impossible. The good things, the attributes that it has, are not really great attributes for a biplane. So it's got a great dive speed, which is wonderful if you're not a biplane and not in that turny crazy style, and it also has a good turn speed. So the general attributes of decent turning and also decent energy retention, unfortunately it doesn't have, so it doesn't really make the cut. That means that for me, the I-15 BIS, which has 4 7.62 PV1 machine guns, is the way to go if you want to start this tech tree. It's a lot more of a nicer machine, it's a lot more fun. When it comes to its maneuverability, it's also just something you can fling about the air and have a lot of fun with. It also has a ton of ammo, 3,050 rounds, so you don't have to worry about, throwing too much out there. When it comes to the ammunition as well, you have a really nice belt. You have this tracer belt, which is just straight APIT, stealth, which is all API, and then universal, which is a mixture of all. So you can set fires, you can destroy stuff. It's one of the nicest, belts in the game, and you get access to rockets as well, which pen 60mm on top of some bombs. So the options that this thing gives you over the Gladiator, which doesn't get any secondaries and does get guns which have IT API, which is very good against other biplanes, but as you can see, just the I-15 it gives you an overall package which can also turn a hell of a lot better than the Gladiator. So I would definitely say go for this one first. It's much more fun. The next plane is the one connected to it, the I-153 M62. Now this is one of those biplanes which is, well, incredibly good for its BR. It turns incredibly well, has a great rate of climb to it. The only thing that really lets it down is its dive speed, and there are only a few planes in the game that can really be able to bully it because of that. A few American planes, such stuff like the HU-100, can also do it. Other machines like the Ki-44, which it's insane to me that is anywhere near the BR of the I-153, but if you are ever in a turn fight, or if you're ever dealing with an enemy in close quarters, the I-153 M62 is incredibly good with its 4 7.62 Shikasses, which are all centrally mounted. So conversion-wise, you don't really, you don't really have to worry about it when it comes to the convergence of the guns. It also has a decently powerful engine, and once again, it does have access to these rockets, which are really useful in ground forces. The 2.0 lineup that I talked about yesterday when we were talking about the ground vehicles, you know, the Stuart, the M8, and the Chiha Kai, it runs really well with that as well. And what I would do is I would take this out as my ground pounder and then use it as well to flip around the sky and deal with any other ground pounders. So it's useful in aerialistic because of its turn rate. It does mean that it can get boom and zoomed a lot by planes which are just faster than it, as I mentioned, stuff like HE-100, and it can be frustrating if you come up against a pilot which is pretty good. Normally that doesn't happen at low tiers, but you know, it still can happen, it still has that ability, but also its usefulness in ground realistic is very good as well. The next plane is the HS-123A1. Now this is a straight copy from the one in the German tech tree. It's a biplane which gets a full bomber spawn. Even though you don't have to take bombs on it. So you can bring this thing out in a realistic with a bomber spawn with no bombs. So you're pretty much just a attacker when it comes to trying to take down stuff like bombers. It only has access to 2 7.92s, but that's generally enough to deal with the majority of stuff that you face. One of the only problems I've run into this machine is that the engine seems incredibly fragile when facing other machines. But if you want a thing which works really well as either a high altitude fighter, you know, you're able to dive on enemies, understand that you won't be able to turn as well as a lot of them, but you will have the initial advantage of speed and you know, energy. And also remember, it does have a different skin as well if you want to run it. It's not the nicest skin, it actually looks like a graphical glitch to me, but overall it's still lovely to see that it has something for it. And talking about its versatility, you also get 450s, which isn't great, you know, not the best thing, but 1 250 and 4 250s, very good in ground realistic at 1.3. The 250 kilo is good enough to annihilate anything you see on the ground. The only thing you have to worry about is, of course, the auto cannons, which will be around the place because you'll be going quite low and quite slow. But as a general machine, very fun to use in aerialistic, and the bomb load is great in ground realistic. The next plane is the Martin 139WC, which may look incredibly similar to pretty much a plane out of the American tech tree, which is the Beast 10B. It is a slightly different plane though, or at least I'm told it's slightly different. It looks very similar to me. The bomb loads are different though. The main thing is the B-10B gets way larger bomb loads, 2 1,000 pounders, or a 2,000 pounder if you want to bring that. Can you imagine bringing that into 1.7 ground battles? It would be kind of crazy. But the Martin 139WC, it has some Browning machine guns to keep it alive. It has a huge blind spot on the back of it thanks to this massive rudder, and that, well, it annoys me. It means that the main place where the enemy attacks you from, you're not able to shoot at, which is always a bit of a problem. I'll kind of show you in this, and I'll just show you here just quickly, because blind for me, turrets need to have not huge blind spots, otherwise you have a situation where you, well, will just die to an enemy who sits on your tail. So another thing as well is it does have a cockpit, it is a placeholder, but the cockpit actually opens backwards, which is kind of interesting, and there's a hell of a lot of moving parts going on here, and it just looks kind of interesting, at least from the outside. You can see here how it just moves forwards and backwards. It's very nice. So there's the gear up. Then you can see you have this blind spot here, which is directly behind the tail. And you can see it extends out all the way. So I cannot target anything in this area. And I'll just level out to show you. So we're leveling out. And you can see if anyone sits behind you, you have no shots. And this is all around this area. So all you have to do to deal with this aircraft is sit in this blind spot behind it, which is not hard to do. It's just right here, just sit directly behind it, and it can't do anything to you. So yeah, that at least for me is very much annoying about this aircraft. As at lower tiers, generally you get people who sit on your booty, and there's nothing really wrong with that. You know, it's generally quite good for business. But you normally want to be able to deal with them, and unfortunately this plane can't. The other thing as well is the bomb loads. So the bomb loads on this, you get 6 100s to start, and then you get 6 different 100s, French 100s, which have nearly twice the amount of explosive mass, so they're technically twice as good in game terms. Then you have 2 200 French bombs, which nearly have 100 kilos of explosive mass, TNT equivalent, and then 2 250s, which have 125 kilos of explosive mass. So you definitely have a bunch of different bombs here. When it comes to what's more useful, well, this one technically has 300 kilos worth of explosive mass, this one here has 200 kilos, and this one here has 250. So if you want the most bang for your buck, you take the 6 100s if you're bombing bases. If you're hitting ground targets, it might be easier to take the 6 250s. They're all located in an internal bomb base, so they all drop individually, meaning that you can technically destroy 6 targets with this. For me, this machine doesn't have too much use when it comes to ground forces, just because the 17s that are around, you know, there aren't any for the ground. And also, if you're going to run something like that, you might as well just run the HS-123 if you want to go reserve, or if you want to go higher, the A-29. The next machine is the CW-21. Now, this is my pick for a machine which is going to go up in BR incredibly quickly. The CW-21 reminds me of when the HE-100 was first released, a machine which has incredible acceleration, has incredible rates of climb, but the difference is where this doesn't have the maneuverability of a very high-end HE-100, you know, at very high speeds. It has insane firepower and still good maneuverability thanks to its decent elevator and rudder. So the CW-21, with the amount of ammunition it has and the amount of power it has in the engine, its dive speed and also its climb speed at the start of games, has the ability to take over games. This is an incredibly good aircraft for what it is, and also when it comes to the guns, they're once again all centrally mounted, so you don't have to worry about convergence. It's very powerful, it does its job incredibly well, and something I do also want to notice, I wonder if it'll do it in the test drive, but on certain maps with the CW-21, it actually starts rolling at the start of airfields, and it seems like it's not going to happen on this map, but it's one of those weird things where it'll just start rolling forward, and I have no idea why, but it gives you that extra little boost. But if you've played this thing, or if you've seen this thing so far, you'll realize it's miles ahead of the competition when it comes to climb rates, when it comes to speed on the deck. Generally, the only way you should die in this thing is if a bunch of HE-100s decide to jump you, and you are kind of screwed. The only times I've had bad situations in this is when I've actually been too fast to the battle. So there is obviously an issue in War Thunder where if you're the first person in to a battle, you're normally targeted by at least 2 or 3 or 4 players. You know, bees around a honeypot idea. And the problem with that is if you're in a CW-21, if you're incredibly fast, you're probably going to be spotted first if you're going towards the enemy. Therefore, the bees start coming towards you. So you still, even with the speed and stuff, you have to be a little bit careful not to be hunted by, you know, 2 or 3 people. Instead, you need your team to engage first, and then you just mop up everything, because it's very, very easy to do. Overall, a great plane, probably the best rank 1 plane that China has at the moment, just because of its incredible speed that it has. The I-16s, so you got the Chung 28, the Type 5, and the Type 10. The main differences between these 3 aircraft are the guns. So the Chung 28 has 2 PV-1s, the Type 5 has 2 Shikasses, and the Type 10 has 4 Shikasses. The other difference is the actual the flaps. So the Chung 28, if we just show it in a test drive, I believe it doesn't actually have flaps. Yep, see, no flaps. And then if we go to the next one, which has different guns, the two Shikasses, the Type 5. One thing that we can show that is different is, once again, the flaps. So this thing should have flaps, if I remember correctly. There you go. It has takeoff flaps, it has combat flaps, it has raised flaps, and it has landing flaps. But you see something that isn't happening? The flaps aren't moving. So I don't know whether it's a visual bug or if something's gone on, but even though this machine, it says that it has flaps, they are not activating, at least from a physical model point of view. I feel like if they were actually activating, you would be able to rip them off as well. So that is a bug that I found with these vehicles. You can see we're in combat position, nothing's changed, we're in takeoff position, and we're also in landing position, and the flaps just haven't moved. Nothing has happened. So yeah, that is a bit of a problem. So that machine is technically supposed to have every set of flaps that you normally have in the game. And then if you have a look at the Type 10, which is the one with the 4 Shikasses, generally the best one, you know, the 1.7 machine, which doesn't even hold a candle to the CW21 right now. It should also have access to just landing flaps. So you don't get takeoff flaps, you don't get combat flaps, but at least you get flaps that work. At least you get flaps which show their physical model in the game. So you can see here, we go up. Oh, by the way, the wheels are incredibly slow. And also, you know, the general view on the outside is quite nice. But you can see here, there's the flaps. So this is what they're supposed to look like in the landing position and the raised position. But yeah, this thing doesn't have access to combat or takeoff. So the Chung has no flaps at all. The Type 10 has access to landing flaps. And then the middle one, the Type 5, has access to all of them, but they don't seem to work. So that is the main differences between them, the weaponry and the use of flaps. Now, everything else on these vehicles is pretty much the same. The way that they fly, the way that they are, incredibly similar, apart from the Type 10 gets access to 95 octane fuel, which is really nice. You know, makes it a lot faster, and also with that extra weaponry, always good. You can see here, no 95 octane fuel. So the problem that the I-16s have is because of the way that their flight model works, they're not fast enough to be able to deal with stuff like CW21s and HE100s, but they're also not maneuverable enough to deal with biplanes. So they're kind of in this like jack of all trades, master of none scenario, and generally at this type of tier, you either want to be a really good turning aircraft or you want to be really good at high speed, so you can go in and annihilate the biplanes and then leave, or be a person who turns with the biplanes and does a lot with them. The I-16s you can't do that with, so you're left in this state where once you engage an enemy, yeah, you might get 1 or 2 kills, but you're going to end up with somebody on you and you can't shake them because you don't have the dive speed, but you also don't have the maneuverability to do anything about them. So far, my disappointment in Rank 1 has been these I-16s. They weren't the hardest to use. You know, for me, the Key 27 Otsu is the hardest to use just because of the guns, but overall, they're just not really fun to play because you feel outmatched no matter what, if you're facing someone of equal BR, like 1.3 or 1.7. The Key 27 Otsu is the next aircraft, and it's serviceable. It's incredibly maneuverable for a monoplane. The main problem I have with it is the guns. The guns themselves, only 2 7.7s. Yes, they do have 1,000 rounds, so you're not going to get through them too long. Sorry, it's going to take you a long time to get through them. And also, you know, you have access to some okay rounds with AP and I being all over the place, but they have such a low fire rate, and it feels like you're just firing toothpicks at the enemy a lot of the time, and nothing is really happening. So for me personally, I'm just not really into this plane. It's got a good dive speed, it turns incredibly well. The elevator usage is insane on this thing, you know, you can flip it all over the place, but just overall, it just doesn't feel nice because of the guns, and also when you come up against the speed demons like the CW21, there's not a lot you can do against it. Another thing I should have also mentioned, the Type 5 has a closed cockpit, as you can see here, which does open up. I'll just show you it in a test flight, and that also differentiates it from the other 2 I-16s that we have in the game. So you can see here, this is what it looks like. Then it comes in. So you got the little area here which flips up, and then the whole thing comes. It's lovely. You know, it's really nice. It's a really lovely cockpit, really close to the pilot, but that's okay. Whoops. So there you go. That's how it works. Anyway, moving on to the next aircraft. What we have is, of course, the Hudson, but it's not really the Hudson, even though it is the Hudson. This is an A-29, and it has access to 2 offensive 7.62mm Browning machine guns. These are mounted in the central area right here. It also has access to a 12.7mm on the booty, and also a 7.62 in the lower fuselage. Generally, this 12.7 is in a very good position. The tail doesn't get in the way of dealing with targets. The 7.62 also, because it is more pushed down, means that the blind spot behind the aircraft doesn't really exist for this aircraft, so it doesn't have the same issue that we talked about before with the other machine, the Martin bomber. So with that said, it's got good coverage behind it to be able to stay alive. It doesn't have any armor though. It has a decent amount of crew. It does have powerful engines for a bomber, and also because it has these 2 forward 7.62s, you can use this after you've after you've dropped your bombs as a pseudo bomber hunter. I always like bombers like the Blenheim, or even machines like the Hampton, which have these forward firing guns, because it means that you can either get involved in the fighter fights and try and create some 2-on-1 scenarios, because you're never going to be able to outturn any of the fighters or outspeed them, but maybe you can help out an ally, or you can go bomber hunting with them, which I equally find incredibly fun. So the A-29 for me is let's get to a base, let's drop my bombs, and then let's go find a bomber to hunt and have fun with. So yeah, the limitation of it though in general is that it doesn't get any other bomb loads, so it can only carry 4 250s and 6 100s, which is a decent bomb load for 2.0. It's overshadowed by a lot of other planes like the NC-2223 and stuff like that, but the main thing is you get your best bomb load stock. So you know for a fact that you're not going to have issues such as with a machine like the SB2M, where you're starting off with only 6 100s and you're ending with 3 500s, meaning that the difference in weight and also the difference in usability of this aircraft is massively hindered by not having these modifications. Where with the A-29, the bombs are what you get. You know, if you play this aircraft, these are the ones that you're just going to start with, and that's what you're going to end up with, so you know what you're going to be using. Then the flight performance ones for me are the most useful when it comes to what modifications to take first, and also it has some decent rounds, such as the universal belt on the turret. It has 3 API shells and a T shell. Then you've got the universal belt, T API for the 7.62, and then the tracer belt, which is just tracers, but I generally run stealth if I'm not, recording, because it's just a lot better for the soul, because your AP is going to do a lot more than tracer shells. So yeah, the A-29 is a good vehicle. It's nice to fly and easy to spade. Normally at these lower tiers, most people don't climb up to your bombers because, well, they can't, because you spawn at about 3,500 and they spawn on the ground. That doesn't really work if there's a bunch of HS-123s or other bombers coming to hunt you, but c'est la vie. The last plane is the Hawk 3. So this is the starter premium for the Chinese. It's an American-made biplane which was sold to China, and in the game it's incredibly fun. There's a reason why it's 1.3 instead of 1.0, and that's because it's got a very nice engine behind it, which can give it a ridiculous max speed for a biplane, and on top of this it has a lovely secondary armament. So 1 500 and 4 100-pounders, meaning that it doesn't just have use as a attacker, or a fighter I should say. It also has use as a dive bomber or a bomber. It's generally good to run in ground realistic if you don't have access to some of the other machines, and also just as a grinder, it is quite nice if you want to skip some of these vehicles. 225% RP and 150% SL is very nice to have at the start of a tech tree. But if the only vehicles I would want to skip out of this part of the tech tree would be the Gladiator, just because it's inferior to the I-15. The I-16s can go. There's no no need for me to play more of them, and I definitely wouldn't want to grind through these again. So I would use the Hawk 3 to grind through both, or grind through that and then move on. But apart from that, there's no real need for it because of how nice the grind was for a lot of these vehicles. But the Hawk 3, just as a general vehicle by itself, it is a very fun biplane. I would put it on the level of stuff like Mark Colin's CR-42, which is a plane that you can either find in the German tech tree right here, or you can find it in the Italian tech tree right here as the 1.3. Both aircraft are fast, both aircraft are biplanes. The Hawk 3 is a little bit more maneuverable than it, and it loses a little bit more when it comes to its speed, but I think I would take the maneuverability against what we find right now, which is a lot of biplanes at low tiers. So overall, it's a fun machine. It hasn't got the best cockpit in the world, which probably would be my only real gripe with it. The cockpit does not look very nice, but apart from that, it's decent. There you go, here's the cockpit. Looks very much what we'll class as standard definition compared to some of the other machines we have, but it does have a telescope that you can see there. So overall, my grind through this tree so far has been very nice. No real speed bumps apart from the I-16s because they just get outdone by, or they have a weakness against everything you fight. So therefore you have to maximize its strengths, and the maximizing the strength is you're generally okay at everything, which isn't a great maximization. Also, their engines are very easy to take out, and I mean by like one hit, and then they're just dead. So that's definitely a problem with them. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting into rank 2. I've already ground out the P66, did that in ground realistic, and also the SB2M because, well, it's just easy to do. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Mopar 1969, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, and Eel of Goats, and of course Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.